The morning after victory should have felt different. Lieutenant Kael Draven stood in the Talorian High Command Fortress, dress uniform itching at his collar, wondering why triumph always tasted like ash. The siege of Korvan Ridge was over. The Virin were scattered. He'd done his job. High Overseer Varum's voice echoed through the ceremonial hall. For valor beyond measure, we present a gift befitting your station. Talorian nobles filled the gallery, their long ears adorned with rank markers that caught the light. Kael expected a commendation, maybe a medal he'd shove in a drawer and forget. What they brought out was a woman. She stood on a platform, bound in ceremonial chains that glowed with bioluminescent tracery. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her long ears pinned flat against her skull in submission. She wore the plain wrap of the servant caste, and she didn't make a sound. A reward, Varum continued, for the hero of humanity. She is yours. The words hit Kael like a weapon discharge. Yours, like she was equipment. Like she was cargo. Every human officer in the room went carefully still, their faces locked in diplomatic neutrality that screamed "Don't cause an incident." The Talorians waited with ceremonial patience for his acceptance. Kael walked to the platform on legs that felt disconnected from his brain. He looked at the woman, really looked, and saw terror buried so deep she'd probably forgotten its name. His hands shook as he reached for her chains. "No," he said quietly. Varum's smile froze. "Lieutenant." Kael released the chains completely. They fell to the platform with a musical crash. "She's not property, she's free." The hall erupted. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his with something between shock and disbelief, so profound it hurt to witness. Human Colonel Rivas was already moving toward him, her expression promising a conversation he wasn't going to enjoy. Riva's office was small and furious. She paced like a caged predator while Kael stood at attention, still processing what he'd done. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Do you have any idea what you just triggered?" Rivas demanded. "Any idea at all? I freed someone who shouldn't have been enslaved in the first place. You invoked the Rite of Liberation." Her voice cracked on the last word. "It's not just freeing her, Draven. You've legally transformed her status from slave to consort. You're now her sworn protector under Talorian law. That bond is permanent unless she chooses to dissolve it." Kael's brain stuttered. I was just trying to do the right thing." The right thing just became a diplomatic nightmare. The Talorian caste system depends on millions of slaves. You just proved their entire social order is a choice, not destiny. Varum's faction will bury you for this. Rivas stopped pacing, her face softening slightly. "Command wants you to claim ignorance. Say you didn't understand the law, anything to void the right before the council formalizes it." "And her?" Kael asked. "What happens to her if I do that?" Rivas looked away. "She goes back." The silence stretched too long. Finally Kael said, "Where is she now?" "Your quarters. They assigned her there before anyone figured out what you'd done." Rivas rubbed her temples. "Talk to her, figure out what she wants. But Draven, the council session is in 3 days. After that, this becomes permanent or it destroys both of you. Choose carefully." Kael found her sitting by the window in his quarters, touching the glass like she'd never seen it before. Maybe she hadn't, not from this side of freedom. "My name is Kael," he said softly. She flinched, then forced herself still. "Old habits. I was called Sera, if that name is acceptable." "It's your name, you don't need my permission." He sat across from her, careful to leave distance. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "What do you want?" Sera's laugh was broken glass. "I don't know how to want things. Wanting was beaten out of me before I learned to read." Her fingers traced patterns on the glass. "Do you know what the Rite of Liberation means to people like me? It's a story, a myth, something that happened once, centuries ago, that proves freedom exists even if we'll never touch it. You're touching it now. Am I?" She finally looked at him. "Or am I just waiting for it to be taken away?" They talked through the night cycle. Sera described a life Kael could barely comprehend, born into debt slavery, owned before she took her first breath, existence measured in service and survival. She'd learned to read by stealing moments with discarded tablets. She'd studied law in secret, knowing it was forbidden, doing it anyway because knowledge was the only thing her owners couldn't confiscate. The right exists because even Talorians once believed slavery was wrong, she explained. But invoking it means admitting their entire society is built on a lie. That's why Varim will kill us both before he lets the council ratify it. But he can't just, Kael started. The explosion cut him off. The window shattered inward, emergency alarms screaming through the fortress. Sera moved on pure instinct, grabbing Kael's arm and pulling him toward a wall panel he'd never noticed. "Servant passages," she said, her fingers working the hidden release. "We go now or we die here." They ran through corridors too narrow for nobility to notice, past rooms where Kael could hear soldiers shouting his name. Sera navigated by memory, every turn automatic, a map written in years of forced servitude. Colonel Rivas found them 3 levels down, her tactical team creating a defensive perimeter. She looked at Kael with something between respect and exasperation. 3 noble houses just filed formal challenges. They're calling the Rite a fraud. Command wants you extracted off-world before this breaks the alliance. No. Sera's voice was quiet but absolute. She stepped forward, addressing Rivas directly despite centuries of conditioning screaming at her to stay silent. Talorian law grants me the right to testify at ratification. If I speak, if I confirm the right was freely given and freely accepted, it becomes unassailable. You'll be marked for life, Rivas warned. Every traditionalist will want you dead. I've been marked since birth. At least now I choose the reason. Sera turned to Kael. You asked what I want to speak. I want them to hear what slavery actually means from someone who survived it. Will you stand with me when I do? Kael thought about the easy path, extraction, reassignment, letting someone else handle the consequences. Then he thought about chains falling to a platform and eyes that held galaxies of disbelief. Yes, he said. Whatever happens, yes. The council chamber felt like a cage built from marble and authority. Talorian nobles filled the galleries, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed rage. Human observers clustered in their designated section, command representatives watching with faces carved from stone. Kael stood beside Sera in the petitioner's circle, while High Overseer Varim prepared to dismantle everything they'd built. The right was invoked in ignorance, Varim began smoothly. The human could not have known our law, therefore his actions carry no weight and the slave reverts to her proper station. Sera rose before anyone could stop her. She spoke in formal High Talorian, the dialect of law and power, words slaves were forbidden to learn but she'd studied in darkness for years. I invoke the right of testimony, granted to all parties in right ratification by the reforms of Kalativaran, 347 cycles past. Her voice carried through the chamber like a blade. I will speak on my own behalf. Shocked silence. Then Varim's attempt to shut her down, overruled by reformist counselors who'd waited generations for this moment. Sera stood in the center of the chamber and told them everything. The beatings that came for eye contact, the casual cruelties that erased personhood one day at a time, the absolute certainty that she would die property and unmourned. Then she described Kael removing her chains, looking at her as if she mattered, as if her voice carried weight. She cited precedents Varim didn't know existed, legal frameworks that proved liberation freely given, could not be retracted by those who profited from bondage. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom, she was waging war on the system itself. The vote was chaos. Traditionalists screamed about social order, reformists argued for evolution. Humans stayed diplomatically silent while their eyes betrayed everything they thought about allies who kept slaves. When the count finished, the Rite of Liberation was ratified by 3 votes. 3 votes that changed 2 lives forever. Later, on a fortress balcony under alien stars, Sera admitted that freedom terrified her because every choice now mattered. Every path was hers to walk or refuse. Kael confessed he had no idea what he was doing, that he'd acted on instinct, and now they were both caught in consequences he barely understood. She smiled, genuinely smiled, and said that was what made him different. Every noble who'd owned her made choices for her. He'd chosen to let her choose. Command reassigned Kael to diplomatic liaison, a sideways move that was half punishment, half acknowledgement of political radioactivity. Talorian reformists cited the Rite as proof systems could evolve.